Hi, I'm Robin Gully.
I'm John Justin.
We are your Ward 2 Council people here to give the council recap. Tonight was actually a long meeting, but kind of not a ton of stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
So we'll just get right into it.
All the better reason for us to summarize it so you don't have to watch several hours of the meeting.
That's right.
Hopefully. But please do. It's really cool.
Yeah. Definitely go and watch the meeting. We started with the open council work session, and the first thing that we talked about was 2025 fee schedule requests.
It was mostly just cleanup, adding damage deposits to a couple places, because we did damage deposits on public spaces that people use. And there were a couple like the ball fields and some stuff with the ice arena that we just hadn't done the damage deposit. So it's not really a fee increase. And then a lot of the other stuff, I think, was just kind of bringing things to a sort of equitably even number for similar sorts of things. You know, so there were minor, a few things went up a little bit, a few things went down a little bit, but really no huge changes, nothing that I would expect. Well, certainly if you're a resident, nothing that would directly affect you much. A couple slightly increased fees for access to a couple things, but
and there were things around construction sites.
Yeah, there was some stuff that would only affect you if you were developing something large in town, not single family. So yeah, I don't think it's all in the packet. If you want to look at it, if there's anything in there that you're like, I think that would, if you see something where it's a hardship where I wouldn't be able to do something I want to do because of that fee, definitely do let us know. And we can address that as time goes on, but I don't think there's going to be a lot of that.
Yeah.
But I'm ready to be proven wrong.
Yeah. Then we did a little bit of work on the 2025 budget, but it's still very much a work in progress.
It's a long process. We didn't get anything concrete. We got a preliminary idea of what the levy proposal would be. And there was some discussion about whether there would be reason to reduce it. And then the balance of obviously we always would like to reduce it if we can. But we also don't want to put it in a position where by reducing it now, you just get hit later on for a much larger increase. And so there's kind of a balance of making sure that everything's operating. Nothing's earmarked for some huge expenditure that is going to massively change things. But like every other city in the metro, I think that at one point we were the second lowest in the area with our percentage. And so we're definitely not running away with stuff, but the levy goes up, things get more expensive. I mean, There's examples that you wouldn't necessarily think about. One of the ones that got me was the price of fire trucks doubling, and you have to order them 3 years in advance. So, I mean, there are things that we have no control over that,
Well, and I don't know that I fully understood this before I was on the council. Maybe everybody else just intuitively knows this or whatever, but we literally, if we don't change the levy, we get the same amount of money from taxes every year over year. With the exception of the fact that I guess that's not completely true because property values go up and things like that, but largely if we have to pay for things that cost more than they did last year, the only way to do it is to increase them.
And wages being a big part of that. There has been a huge increase in what the expected wage is in pretty much throughout city government, and that's not us, that's every city. And those are things you just have no control of. You can't lose out on hiring the people you need to have. You can't lose people who are good that work for the city because we can't give them the opportunity to continue to work. Fortunately, we have a staff that, not universally, I'm sure, but largely wants to stay here. But you also can't expect somebody to look at a pay cut from what they could do somewhere else and stay just out of the goodness of their heart. So we need to make sure we're compensating people fairly, just like everywhere else. Look at wages rising, look at costs rising. It's not shocking that our levy has to go up when we've all definitely noticed other things have gone up. I've done a lot of repricing at my store, and it's not in a downward direction. So, and it's not because I'm making more money. So it kind of is what it is. But there'll be more discussion. We're definitely going to look and see if we can shave down the levy a little bit, but we want to do it in a way that doesn't create problems downstream, doesn't make us penny wise, dollar foolish.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the old kick the can down the road. Nothing's getting cheaper.
No, we don't want to make it especially hard on any of our residents, folks who live here in like 5 years versus today. It's easier to take an incremental change than it is to take a big change at one time.
Yes.
We also don't want to do that to future people who run for these council seats because it makes it really difficult for them to recover if we haven't been like doing regular maintenance. And one thing that we're really proud of on our council is that we've like created a regular maintenance schedule. We've been working really hard to get all of our city infrastructure into good shape. We have like a real plan to get everything to like where it needs to be to be like safe and functional for everyone. And not that it isn't right now, but like there was a good amount of time where we were not doing because people didn't want to increase the levy, we were not doing the maintenance that we needed to do.
And that's part of what's affecting the levy that we have to do now, is that we are covering things that maybe should have been done earlier and maybe weren't seen, but and also it's the thing that I think is important to remember is that city budgets they don't reset at the beginning of every year. The things that we choose to do now affect 2034, if you know what I mean. I mean, if we don't do a road project now, it's going to have to be done.
And usually
it never
will be more expensive.
Yeah.
And it definitely will be more expensive. And a lot of the time it'll be worse because we didn't do it. We didn't do like the sort of routine maintenance work that we needed to do in 2024. And we just pushed it off. And now, hey, we have to replace the whole road instead of doing like
mill and overlay or something like that.
You know, so.
And the other thing that was brought up that I thought was very good, and this is our city manager brought this up, there is always the possibility that you go through another significant recession. Nobody can predict these things. And we may be in a position where when things are tough, really tough for people, and I know they're not easy for people now, but if things took an economic turn next year or the year after that, we want to be able to say, hey, we can really pull back the levy. But if we've not done it properly up until then, it's out of your hands. I mean, there's a certain point where you can't drop the levy. Like, let's say we need to drop the levy to a 3% increase because we're in economic turmoil, and we can't. That's not good stewardship for any citizen, any resident of the city. So that's the other thing that we have to keep in mind is, we don't control the economy. I wish we did.
Don't. But I think that's what we're always working to do on the council is be good stewards. And, I like, even with some disagreement about how we make these decisions, every single person on the council and every single person who is part of our staff, like everybody's trying to think about how to be good stewards to the resources that we have.
Exactly. So you'll see more on that. I mean, I think we'll have another work session, at least one, maybe two on the budget, and then we'll start to get to a more formalized, and we'll determine that actual levy amount. And so just stay tuned on that one. And again, if you have ideas,
you can definitely look at the documents that are in the packet too. So, all right. Then we got into the council meeting. We started with a proclamation for Hispanic Heritage Month, and that was read by our own Edgar Herrera and his wonderful children. So thank you, Edgar, for
thanks as always, Edgar.
And happy Hispanic Heritage Month to everyone. And then we went on to
the least exciting public hearing ever. Well, there's a couple. It was vacating what was a planned cul-de-sac that was never built over by the M&I development where the church is. And it's platted out, so there's this circle that was never built. And so we're just vacating that right away. So the M&I development and then one other property owner will actually gain some land at no cost to them.
Yeah.
So hey, and we are never going to use it.
Talk about these things before. So when we vacate land, it just means like we had retained ownership of a particular piece of land to like build an alleyway or build a cul-de-sac or something, and then hey, like we never did that,
and we're never going
to do it. So if you you might not even know that wasn't actually that was like part of an easement, not your property. But then a lot of the time when we go back and look at these maps, we'll realize like, hey, we still retain ownership of this. no, this should really go in
Yeah.
this house.
And we've done it with a bunch of alleys, and I think they've just been sitting there, some of them for, I don't know, maybe 100 years. I don't know exactly how long, a long time.
It wasn't our council, but like
No. And yeah, so it's a pretty
surveillance
common sort of thing to do in a city. And I think we've made an effort to try and identify it, because it's good to just do these cleanup measures. Because again, if you don't do them, then eventually it becomes something where somebody builds on an easement, not knowing that they're doing it, and then you get into trouble. So it's much easier to just, if we're never going to use it, why create the havoc of people not being able to utilize land that we're never going to use? So that was pretty straightforward.
Yeah. And then we revisited the rental license application of Eagle Point, and I think we just want to give a little bit of props to the management folks at Eagle Point, because you may have heard us talk about the fact that they were in, let's say, a bit of hot water with us at the council for having some issues with not pulling permits for, and this is all public, this was all in a previous council meeting probably 6 months ago.
Yeah, safety and security stuff, pretty much.
A lot of safety and security stuff, and like just not following the rules. Well, they did the things that they were supposed to do.
Yep.
So
there's a few things we still have to straighten out, but they moved to a provisional license rather than, I'm going to get that wrong.
From a
provisional license to a license with conditions.
So there's some work that they still need to do, but like they've been making really good progress on the list.
And that's why we, that's the thing that I think people don't understand is we aren't doing provisional licenses because we're trying to punish people. We're trying to get things up to the standard and the safety and security of the residents that we require in our city. And this is when it works well, is when you have somebody that works with you, fixes the things that they can address, and continues to fix the things. There's more to be done, and that's also in the packet if you're curious. But it's moving in the right direction rather than the wrong direction, which is one of the things we can do with our rental properties around town, is make sure that standard is set at a high bar, maintained at a high bar. And I think in particular, we've been paying a lot of attention to that over the last few years. And we're going to continue to with any property that we come across. So.
Yeah, yep. And then we had a first reading for a charter amendment. This was basically cleanup from a law changed at the state. Well, actually, I don't even think it was a law. They changed the way that they did payroll for election judges a couple years ago, and it made it so that it wasn't really possible for people who serve on city council, so councilors or mayor, to serve as election judges, because you weren't allowed to have another employment.
You couldn't be, basically you don't want somebody who's elected to also work for the city.
Right.
There's never going to be good.
And we can tell you
you don't want me to be the park director. Well, first of all, I'd be bad at it because I don't know anything, but also because there's definitely a double dipping if you're setting policy and you're also implementing policy. Yeah. So that was the intention behind the original law. With these changes, election judges fell into that weird thing where, as city employees being paid, technically it would have flown in the face of that rule. And so it was modified. Charter Commission, of course, did a ton of work on this, and they altered that language to fit that possibility. And it was a first reading. There will be a public hearing. If you do have feelings on it, it sounds some people wanted more clarification. Yeah. And so we'll have that opportunity at the next meeting.
Well, and just to clarify one really important point, which is that you cannot be on an election judge in a precinct where you're on the ballot.
Right, so that would not be good.
If you are actively running for office, if you're on the ballot, you cannot serve as an election judge in that precinct.
You won't see me in the Ward 2 election judge seat.
Right.
Ever.
But, on the other hand, we really, really need election judges. Yes, and so I think part of the impetus for that was that we have council members who have served as election judges.
Yeah, and have volunteered up until now and not been paid, which it is not an easy job.
Yeah, it's not. It's a ton of work,
a lot of time,
a lot of training. So it's it's important. But yeah, if you have feelings about it, it's going to come up in public hearing.
I would guess probably next meeting, unless we're really busy on the next meeting, we can't fit it in.
I'm pretty sure it'll be next meeting because it needs to happen pretty quickly, because Early voting starts in 11 days.
Yes, this is a good time to mention that.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
Good segue.
So that was not exactly on the council agenda, but don't forget that early voting starts September 20th. We usually go right to the Dakota County Northern Service Center. So I recommend it. Super easy. You walk in, get your ballot, and then guess what? You stop getting calls from the party and stuff too. So
that's true.
Nice.
That's another incentive if you want. And then the final thing was a condemnation of land. And I'm going to start this off. And there is some negotiation going on with this particular situation. So we really probably can't talk as much as we might otherwise. It's just, in the middle of a negotiation, you don't do that. But this is, condemnation sounds like a really scary word. It sounds like taking of land. What this is temporarily having land that we need to do a construction project that then people will be compensated for the use of that land, and then they will retain that land. So we're not taking land from anybody. And I just say that it's not an argument for or against or anything like that, but just the fact that I think that those words make people cringe.
Oh yeah.
Right? I mean, nobody wants to get a letter that they're condemning anything, right? Because it sounds like they're going to come knock your house down, but that's not really the situation here. So it was more of we've stalled out on negotiations on the price with, I think, 2 properties of the 5 involved in this. And so we need to make this move forward. Doesn't end negotiations. I think everybody's hope is that what we can do as staff and they can get together, make it all work. Everybody leaves the table happy, and then we never go through the condemnation full process. But we need to have access to it. We can't not do a project because we can't physically do it because we're in limbo land on places where they just need to do grading. I mean, the thing is grading and the moving of a sidewalk. So
well, and I should say that what we're talking about is we're redoing some of the land in like the Smith Dodd corridor. So I don't think we even said we're talking about. And
partially because It almost is more of a procedural thing where it's not super, it's because of this particular construction thing, but this is something that we did on Robert Street.
Yeah.
This is not the first time we've done it. It's not a aggressive tactic. It's a pretty normal thing for cities to do when you just come to that impasse. Because at the end of the day, we have to have that access.
Yeah.
We can't not have it because it could make the entire project non-functional.
Well,
which would be a problem.
This is a project that we've talked about a lot in the past.
Yeah.
So I think most people are probably aware that we have this little itty bitty park on that intersection, and that we're working, and that we have this intersection where there are I don't know.
It's my second least favorite intersection in West St. Paul because we fixed the one that I hated the most. That was very close to my house.
So it has 6 different ways that people can cross at the same place, and it's terrible and it makes no sense.
Yeah.
And we really need to fix it, and so we got a whole plan. We spent years working on it, and we're very close to actually being able to do it. And so this was a step in that process.
Yeah.
So.
And it doesn't close the door to various negotiations at all. Like I said, negotiations ongoing. Other concerns were brought up by one of the people that's involved, and those concerns will be heard, will be dealt with. They don't actually directly have to do with this, and so that's why we move forward on this. But I don't want it to seem like we're closing the door and we're taking our ball and going home. That's not the intention of any of this. We want to come to a acceptable settlement, and we may need to push the needle a little bit because our timeline is our timeline, but nobody's trying to get over on anybody. We got to move forward on it, and there'll be a lot more discussion, and you'll see that as we go forward.
Yeah. Yep.
And then a closed session.
The last thing was that we had an EDA meeting, but it was all closed session, so we can't talk about it.
Another one of those classic endings to our summary. You'll hear about it soon enough, is what I will say. No final decision was actually made on anything. You can't do that in a closed session. We can't just decide what we're going to do. It's guidance for staff. And so we gave guidance for staff that varied depending on who it was, and that's about all we can say.
Yeah, and just a reminder for folks, the only reason very, 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 very limited reasons that we're allowed to have a closed
Yeah.
session. This one,
Purchase of a real property, I
purchase
believe.
of a
is
real
the-
property, I think, is the reason.
But
So,
as we all know that everybody is interested in transparency in government, we never do closed sessions because we're just sneaking behind your back.
we can't.
And we
Like,
legally
literally
can't.
can't legally.
Yeah,
so.
there are lawyers that work for us that will make sure we don't do anything wrong, and they're very, very good at it.
They are, yeah. So, anyway,
That's
that's what
it.
we've got. So, thanks everyone.
Have a lovely night.
Have a good night. Reach out if you have any questions,
Yep.
thoughts, ideas, any of it. We're here for it.
Yep. Bye-bye.